Welcome to Cinemophile, where we bring you the best in independent, documentary, and foreign films, and we talk to the people who made them. I'm your host, Mike Caspar, and you can find out more about the program by going to cinemophilepod.com. Bonnie Yeager, once heralded as the world's prettiest photographer, had a huge influence on 20th century pop culture, though few people know her name. Whether popularizing the bikini, helping discover Bettie Page, shaping the image of Playboy, or inventing the selfie, Bonnie was a trailblazer whose work bucked against conservative 1950s America and helped pave the way for the feminist movement and the sexual revolution. And Bonnie Yeager was certainly responsible for all of that and more. The film is called Naked Ambition, and we're joined today by the co-directors, Scholl and Kareem Tabsch. To both of you, welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks
Good to
so
be here.
First, there is so much of an influence that Bonnie Yeager had on our outlook on this sort of the feminism, the outlook on women, on what women could or should be doing, putting it front and center. How did you come upon her in terms? I know this project goes back a few years. I think back to 2012. But what put you on her? How did you? Which one of y'all say, Dennis?
I've lived in Miami for over 60 years, and Bunny was kind of a local hero, if you will. She was somebody that everybody in town knew about. She was a beloved figure at the time that I started to ask her to make the film in 2012. She'd had a museum show by then, and people were starting to finally kind of rebound with her work. So in 2012, I went to her and I said, hey, I'd like to make a film about you. She was 83. I said, I'm thinking to myself, she's going to love this. She goes, absolutely not. I'm much too busy. I've got all these books to do and shoots to do. Not a chance. All right. I'm nothing if not tenacious. I would come back every 3 months or so. And in 2014, she said to me, okay, let's make that film. And I'm thinking to myself, I hope she understands that I'm making a film about her and not with her, which is always a tricky thing when you do docs. So in 2014, I scrambled this big shoot, probably the biggest shoot I've ever done. The day of the shoot, Bunny was supposed to come in at 10. And at 10 o'clock, they called and said she wasn't coming in until noon. I was like, okay, I'm behind anyway already. At noon, she was going to come at 2. At 2, she was going to come in at 4 p.m. And at 4 p.m., they said she's in the hospital. And Bunny died. So that was a very, very difficult moment for me because I had been doing pre-production for 2 years, big shoot, lots of money. I just, it's one of those things. It happens. I've never let that happen since. Whenever somebody says they're willing to talk to me, I get them in the chair the next day if I can. I put the thing on the shelf. I boxed it all up, put it on the shelf, and kind of just stopped thinking about it. And then about 4 or 5 years later, Kareem and I made our first film together called The Last Resort. It was about the elderly Jewish population in South Beach and 2 photographers who captured it. And it was it really played well. It was everywhere. Lots of time in theaters, weeks and weeks and weeks. It was acquired by Netflix. Then folks started coming to me and saying, what are you going to do next? And I think the answer is you're not allowed to say, I don't know. So when they asked me that, I said, I'm going to do this Bunny Yeager film. And so I was committed. I took it off the shelf. And the first person I called after that was Kareem, because we had such a beautiful working relationship throughout The Last Resort. And, we kind of had it rolling. And so I called Kareem. We started working on the film together. And we were getting ready to start shooting in early 2020. And of course, the world shut down for another 3 years. So come open up, the end of 22, thereabouts. And we were able to get everybody at that point. We were able to capture everybody we needed and build the film out. And we showed it at Doc NYC, and here we are. But it's a long road, 13 years of, but it wasn't like we were shooting for 13 years, probably 8 or 9 years off because of various circumstances.
Well, Kareem, in terms of that off time, the sort of period between 2014 and when you shot, had the world's perspective on Bunny changed? What were the things that were significant in that period of time that might have shifted the attention or the focus of the film?
Well, I think towards the end of Bunny's life, she was kind of finally getting her due from the art world establishment. She'd had a career retrospective at the Andy Warhol Museum in Pittsburgh, the Fort Lauderdale Art Museum, NSU Art Museum Fort Lauderdale had done an exhibition of her work. Right before her passing, there's a beautiful book. I believe it was right before her passing. Maybe it was, but around that time, there's a beautiful book by Rizzoli of Bunny's work. So she was kind of finally getting modern day mainstream appreciation as she passed. What I think has shifted in the time since then is really the explosion of both the selfie culture, right? In which, we like to say, while Bunny Yeager wasn't the first person to do self-portraiture, that certainly predated her, she was really the person who helped create modern day selfie culture through her work,
Mm.
right? Some of her most beautiful work is her self-portraiture. And so that's one of the things that kind of shifted in society, and I think. And then the other thing, of course, is this embracing of sexuality and sex positivity. That you can be it's okay to be sexy. It's okay to show yourself in ways that are empowering to you, and the sense of agency for women over their own body. All of those are things that Bunny Yeager had championed decades before. So I think that, in the time since she's left us, society is in many ways caught up to what she was pushing for and at the vanguard of decades before.
I just want to quickly let people know that Naked Ambition is coming out on Friday, September 12th in New York at the Quad Cinema, and also here in Los Angeles at the Laemmle NoHo, and then a couple of days later at other Laemmle locations. And it'll be rolling out across the country, Chicago, Miami, Portland. It's just a fun watch, and it does take you back to this era when women were supposed to stay home, were supposed to essentially take care of their husbands and family, and should be happy with that. And to see this kind of burgeoning recognition that this didn't have to be that way. And as you said, Kareem, that she embraced this sort of body positive attitude. And it really carried over. And I'm in the film, the mention of Marilyn Monroe, that to me was sort of the beginning of an American embrace of what we see Bonnie embody in the film. Well, Dennis, in terms of the people that we see in the film that are related to her, there's a very interesting family dynamic that plays out in the film, but also some of the people that she inspired or she actually launched their careers. Bettie Page. There's a number of different, ways to talk about her influence, but let's start with Bettie Page because I want to stay on that, and we'll get to her family too as well. But how did that happen? Because I think most people know who Bettie Page is.
Sure. I mean, she's something like the sixth most licensed dead celebrity after, people like Elvis and Bob Marley. So yeah, she's very, very, still remains very popular. Betty, when she came to Miami, she was kind of on the lam. She had been shooting these bondage videos with Erwin Claw, who was a very famous shooter at that time for these kind of specialty videos,
Yeah.
foot fetish things, playing with a doll kind of dwarf. People would send in and go, why don't you have her do this? Why don't you have her do that? And so somehow, I don't remember what committee it was, but they were starting to hold hearings and they were going to call Betty. And so she split and she came to Miami and Bunny heard that she was in town and she found her and she called her and she said, why don't you come and pose? And of course, there were only a couple of shoots, but from which the most amazing thing came out of it. And you just don't know when lightning is going to strike like that. I mean, those pictures, you never get tired of looking at them. They are just so extraordinary. Betty, it's kind of like that girl next door look. She's happy, she's smiling. She looks like afterwards she'd go out with you for a beer. And so, from that kind of shooting, Bunny and Betty, kind of formed this bond that was to stay with them, the rest of their lives. They lost touch. In the film, we found where they got back together for a little bit and chatted. So that was a really, really important moment, certainly for Betty, but definitely for Bunny.
Kareem, I want to talk a little bit about the family dynamic because it plays out in very consequential ways in the telling of Bunny Yeager's story, particularly with her husband. No spoilers here. We don't need to get too far down that road, but an interesting dynamic. I'd like to talk a little bit about that.
The family dynamic is a really interesting and complicated one at kind of multiple levels, right? Bunny was both a woman of her time in that she wanted to be a devoted wife and mother and homemaker. And at the same time, she was a woman who was decades ahead of her time in that she wanted to have her own career, her own art practice, her own money making, and she pushed against the kind of social mores of what a wife mother should do. She had a husband who was very Bud Irwin, who was increasingly supportive of her. I mean, he really championed Bunny a great deal. Bud was a police officer, but certainly someone with his own kind of aspirations to be in the arts. He had wanted to act a little bit, and he collaborated with Bunny a great deal. They made some films together. He also would accompany her to some of her public shoots to kind of be, the muscle, so to speak. So he was really supportive of her. I think at the same time, inevitably, Bunny was the talented one in the family, the most talented one in the family. And so she outshone Bud in many ways. And I think that and the fact that Bunny was up against some forces that pushed against her work and pushed against her kind of female autonomy that she was promoting at the time, definitely created some challenges for the family, and certainly created some challenges for Bud. And
Yeah.
we explore that in the film.
Yeah.
But the other part of the family dynamic that I think is really compelling and kind of continues is, Bunny had two daughters, Cherry Lou and Lisa. There's few years apart. And Bunny very much didn't want to have to choose a lane. She didn't just want to be this beautiful model, stunning photographer, actress, singer type. She was a devoted mom. She was a PTA mom, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
She was throwing birthday parties for her kids, but her kids were very different than her. And Lisa, her younger daughter, was deaf, and that certainly created a difficult dynamic in a time when, we're talking about the 60s. In particular, that it was very, very different than it is today. No one in the family learned sign language. That created, I think, some challenges. And then Sherry Lou, the older daughter, was for quite some time in her early years drafted into the business. She helped design logos for some stuff. She was a bit of assistance, but she became a very reluctant participant. And so fast forward many years, Sherry Lou leaves Florida for the Midwest and really rejects the photography. She's a devout born again Christian, but as she describes, her kind of rejection of the work predated that. She had a problem with the nudity. She still does. And Lisa, on the other end, remained in South Florida and really embraced her mom's work and career and worked with her and was just really her right hand man, right hand woman through the very end. And even after Bunny passed, she kept managing the estate and the archive for several years. And there was some friction between the sisters, I think for a multitude of reasons, as anybody who has siblings know. But also there's a very much a disconnect between their view of the work. And we in the film explore that because I think that that's kind of part of that legacy and part of, and it's a good representation of how other people feel. I think most people love Bunny's work, but we certainly have met some people that think it maybe it objectified women, and which is what Cherry Lou has viewed. She loves her mother, thinks her mother was a great talent, does not love the photographs. Whereas Lisa thinks it's beautiful art. And I think that the majority of people who are exposed to Bunny's work think the same. But we thought it was very important to explore both the family dynamic and this how they might represent the viewer at large, both of it at the time and today.
Yeah, and I think that's really important, and thank you for running through that because I think it's a representation of American society, the times, the places, all the different elements that come into us judging and still having issues with the human body and what is it a utility or is it something to be celebrated? I mean, there's all of those kind of conflicting sort of perspectives on that come into play in her family as well as in our society. So. I appreciated that part about it. But in the last minute or so that I have with you, I just want to say what a joyous, really truly joyous film this is, getting into her life. I mean, obviously were moments of tragedy in her life, but the film is about a celebration of her work, a celebration of sexuality, celebration of just what it is to be an artist and to be free to do what you feel compelled to do.
Mike gets it. Mike gets it. We're very lucky, Mike, in that we were able to attract a wonderful editor. Her name is Dita Von Teese, and she had a profound impact on the arc of the film. And the arc of the film comes out exactly the way that you described it. And that was very important to Kareem and I. And so she gets a lot of credit for making the film feel the way it does and the way that you're responding to it. So that's a wonderful result.
Yeah, it's terrific. I truly appreciate it. It's great work. I want to thank you both for your time today. Thank you for Naked Ambition. We were speaking with the co-directors, Dennis Scholl and Kareem Tabsch. To both of you, thank you. The film is coming out on September 12th in New York and at Quad Cinema, Los Angeles, at the Laemmle NoHo, and we'll be rolling out to other Laemmles after that in Los Angeles area. The Music Box Theater in Chicago, and then on to the 26th in Miami at the Cinema South Beach. That should be a lot of fun. Portland, Oregon at the Hollywood Theater. Thank you both for your time today.
Thank you.
You have been listening to Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar, the place where you will hear from the best in independent documentary and foreign filmmakers. Please check out our previous interviews as well as upcoming interviews and special programming by going to cinemaphilepod.com. We are also available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube, searchable under Cinemaphile with Mike Kaspar. Until next time, thank you for listening.